Congressional leadership. Who will work with the new Trump administration to implement the Republican agenda? Final overseas trip. President Obama tries to reassure our European allies.
The U.S. bishops elect a new president and vice president of their conference. I'm Wyatt Goolsby reporting in Baltimore. We'll tell you how they're prioritizing promoting a culture of life.
And a new class of cardinals, how they represent the global church. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, November 15th, 2016. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick. Republicans elect Paul Ryan as House Speaker for another term, unifying the GOP, while Democrats delay their leadership votes today. Jason Calvi spoke with members of Congress, joining us tonight now from the Capitol. Jason?
Brian, the unanimous vote was behind closed doors today. Alabama Republican Mo Brooks said that Donald Trump really controlled whether Speaker Paul Ryan was renominated as Speaker. Today, the Republicans learned that Governor Mike Pence and Donald Trump were firmly behind Paul Ryan. But there was some question beforehand. Would those hardline conservative Tea Party members of the Republican Party also back Paul Ryan? And now we know the answer.
The Conservative Freedom Caucus, a thorn in the side of former Speaker John Boehner. Today, they are supporting Speaker Paul Ryan.
Can the Freedom Caucus work with Paul Ryan? Are you looking forward to working?
We've already been working with him and trying to work on a number of initiatives that help the American people.
Speaker Ryan's message today, unity among Republicans.
Welcome to the dawn of a new, unified Republican government.
During the election, Ryan postponed endorsing Donald Trump. Today, the Speaker says he talks to President-elect Trump virtually every day.
We are on the same page. We're working hand in glove, and we're going to make sure that this is a very successful administration. But more importantly, we're going to make sure that the voices we heard from this election for the American people are acted upon.
Happy Republican lawmakers left a meeting today clutching Make America Great Again hats, while Democrats verge on disarray.
Do you think it's time for a change in the party leadership here in the House?
No.
It's not clear if Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, who has led House Democrats for 12 years, will be ousted. There's long been grumblings from Democrats who say new leadership is needed at the top. More than 24 House Democrats successfully pushed to delay their leadership election until November 30th.
I think there's a lot of soul searching that has to go on within our party, and it's much broader than our caucus.
No one has yet come forward officially to challenge Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi, but we do know Ohio Democrat Tim Ryan says he's considering a run. He says the Democratic Party's message really is not resonating, Brian, with middle America.
So what happens next for Speaker Ryan?
Well, the whole House, both Democrats and Republicans, will be voting on his candidacy as Speaker. That will be happening in early January. He just needs a simple majority, 218 votes, which is very, very likely, especially since Republicans have almost 20 more than that. So that is a foregone conclusion that he will be Speaker. But again, those elections are in early January here at the Capitol. Brian?
All right, Jason Calvi, that newly restored Capitol Dome looking beautiful behind you. Will take you inside a little later. Donald Trump weighs his choices for top cabinet picks and White House staff. Vice President-elect Mike Pence and a team of advisors met at New York's Trump Tower today, reviewing the possibilities. Former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani and former United Nations Ambassador John Bolton are reportedly in the running for Secretary of State. Bolton is considered a hawk on foreign affairs. In fact, last year he advocated the bombing of Iran to halt that country's nuclear program. President Obama reassures European countries that America is committed to NATO. This after President-elect Trump criticized that organization during his campaign. Obama is in Greece beginning his last trip abroad as president. Appearing with the Greek president, he talked about the importance of NATO for Americans and Europeans.
Across Democratic and Republican administrations, there's a recognition that the NATO alliance is absolutely vital.
Obama later joined the Greek prime minister and attended a state dinner. His next stop, Germany, where he'll meet with Chancellor Angela Merkel. He referred to Merkel today as his closest international partner these past 8 years. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Our nation's capital is one step away from allowing assisted suicide. D.C. council members gave final approval to a bill that would allow patients with 6 months or less to request lethal medication. Now it goes to Muriel Bowser, the mayor, for her signature. The D.C. Catholic Conference says it's sorely disappointed and urges the mayor to veto the so-called Death with Dignity Act. U.S. Catholic bishops elect new leaders today. They say promoting respect for human life is a priority and hope to work with President-elect Donald Trump. Wyatt Goolsbee reports tonight from Baltimore. Wyatt?
Brian, today the bishops elected Cardinal Daniel DiNardo of the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston to lead their conference. Cardinal DiNardo has previously served as vice president, and before that he was actually the chair of the conference's pro-life committee. Cardinal DiNardo won today with 55% of the vote on the first ballot. That's a big deal considering there are 10 people on that ballot. For vice president, the bishops elected Archbishop Jose Gomez from the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, which is 70% Latino. DiNardo and Gomez both represent the growing Latino Catholic population in the United States, and both men have a strong focus on being faithful to the church teaching and are vocal about protecting conscience rights.
My hope would be that we can sit down with the administration or meet with them in some fashion, perhaps even in terms of Congress, relative to some pro-life things. I would certainly think the certain aspects of the Affordable Care Act would be great if we could sit down and see them worked out relative to, let's say, like the Little Sisters of the Poor and analogous things.
I think it's important for Catholics to know our faith better and be able to share that with other people. And that's what Pope Francis talks about, of becoming missionary disciples.
Catholics are by far the single largest religious faith organization with 70 million members here in the United States. This afternoon, their leaders got a surprise. Pope Francis sent a video message to the American bishops praising American diversity within the church, but he also urged bishops to build bridges and to break down walls. Now, coming up a little bit later in the newscast, I sit down with a one-on-one interview with Bishop Robert Barron, who was just elected the head of the Committee for Evangelization.
All right, Wyatt Goolsbee, we look forward to that. Thank you. In the meantime, Dr. Matthew Bunson just returned from Baltimore, where he covered the bishop's fall meeting for EWTN's Catholic News Agency. What do you expect from Cardinal DiNardo's leadership?
Yeah, Cardinal DiNardo, by training, is an expert in the Church Fathers. He's a patristic scholar, and you can see in his writings and a lot of his temperament that he brings the wisdom of the early church, the early fathers, into the public discourse, especially when he was head of the Committee for Life. He's a very capable administrator, and he's also a very forceful personality. I think he's ideally suited to deal with sort of the Trump administration that's going to be coming in January.
It will be interesting to watch. What do you think of the selection of Archbishop Gomez as the vice president, most likely to succeed DiNardo?
He will almost certainly succeed Cardinal DiNardo probably in 3 years.
Right.
His choice has been interpreted by some as some sort of an attack on Donald Trump on immigration. The bishops aren't politically minded in that way. They're looking for exactly the right kind of person to assist Cardinal DiNardo as vice president. The two worked together very closely when Gomez was the Archbishop of San Antonio in Texas, and DiNardo, of course, is in Galveston, Houston. So they worked well together. They're friends. So Gomez is going to be a prophetic voice on issues like immigration, helping DiNardo to be a very solid, stable administrator.
But it is interesting that both of these men are in dioceses that are very heavily immigrant, mostly Latinos?
Mostly Latinos, but we need to expand that. In the two dioceses, the two archdioceses, 60 languages are used to say Mass.
Very diverse.
Very diverse. The two of them represent a seismic shift of the Catholic population, south, southwest, and west. They also represent sort of the changing face, the external face of the church, of migrants coming here, much as they did in the 19th century. Today, migrants are coming here from all over the world. We see that. This is the future of American Catholicism, and they have their finger very clearly on the pulse of that.
What was said about life, religious liberty, other key issues?
Yeah, the bishops are very strong in supporting life, as they always have been. They're also still concerned about religious liberty. We may hopefully see the end of the HHS mandate, but the bishops are still concerned about the push for LGBT issues, Planned Parenthood, and the rights of religious liberty and religious freedom around the world.
We appreciate your coverage. Dr. Matthew Bunson with the National Catholic Register and EWTN senior contributor. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Great to be with you.
Thanks, Matthew. Well, hours after President-elect Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin talked on the phone, Russia launches new airstrikes in Syria. Russian jets and long-range missiles hit several targets in Aleppo. During yesterday's phone conversation, Putin and Trump reportedly agreed on the need to combine efforts in the fight against international terrorism. A team on the ground in Iraq tries to make villages safe after troops forced ISIS militants out. Mines Advisory Group says northern Iraq is littered with explosives. ISIS left behind mines and booby traps, which have already killed several villagers.
They had like about 11 deaths in dead people died in this village, 5 injured. And then in the neighboring villages, since we arrived in the last 3 weeks, 6 people have died and 4 injured.
Adults in villages are teaching children to avoid toys found on the ground that may be booby-trapped. Coming up, the Vatican prepares for the end of the Jubilee Year of Mercy and freedom of religion. Will Donald Trump protect conscience rights? Our church celebrates St. Albert the Great today. The Dominican was a scientist long before the age of science and became the teacher and mentor of St. Thomas Aquinas. Thanks for joining us this Tuesday evening, the 15th of November. I'm Brian Patrick. Cuba pardons hundreds of prisoners at the request of Pope Francis. 787 people were selected for pardons based on crimes committed. None of those pardoned were convicted of serious crimes such as homicide and drug trafficking. Earlier this month, the Holy Father asked leaders around the world to consider granting clemency to some inmates. Pope Francis welcomes Dutch pilgrims to St. Peter's Basilica. The Dutch Association of Catholic Organizations came to Rome as part of the final week of the Jubilee Year of Mercy. The Holy Father reminded the pilgrims of the importance of divine mercy to save us and give us life. The extraordinary Jubilee of Mercy officially closes this weekend. Pope Francis began the Jubilee a year ago, opening the first holy door in Bangui in Central African Republic. He called for holy doors to be established in every diocese worldwide. That is a first for Vatican Jubilees, the celebration of a special church anniversary, a tradition dating back 700 years. All holy doors are now closed except for the one at St. Peter's. Pope Francis will close that himself this Sunday on the Feast of Christ the King, officially ending the Year of Mercy. Let's go to Rome and our producer, Mary Shovlin. Mary, how will the Vatican celebrate the end of this historic Jubilee Year of Mercy?
Brian, there'll be a Mass in St. Peter's Square this Sunday to celebrate the end of this great Holy Year of Mercy, an extraordinary one, as you said, a historic one full of many firsts. The Holy Door will be cemented up, as is tradition. Inside, they put coins from the pontificate and certain papal documents so that the next Pope opens the next Holy Door, we'll find them there, sort of a continuation. And as I said, it's been one of firsts. For the first time, we've had holy doors all over the world. We've had missionaries of mercy. 20 million pilgrims have come here to Rome to experience, and they've participated in all over the world. So a truly historic day, all coming to a head this Sunday. There's a lot of excitement here in the air.
And preview the 17 new cardinals to be elevated, coinciding with the end of the Jubilee.
That's right. Pope Francis wanted to have a consistory the day before the end of the Jubilee. So he'll create 17 new cardinals. 13 will be of voting age, which means they'll be under the age of 80. And they're really coming from all over the world. There are 3 from the United States, of course, but the others really come also from the peripheries, from Mauritius and Bangladesh, for example. And so they're really representing Pope Francis's intention to take the church from the center here out into the edges and throughout the world.
Mary, can you highlight just a few of the 17 that will be elevated and the significance of their selection?
Well, 3 really stood out to me, Brian. First of all, we have the Apostolic Nuncio in Syria. Pope Francis said he'll become a cardinal, but he'll keep his position there to show the church's closeness to that devastated country. We also have the Archbishop of Bangui in the Central African Republic, which is, of course, where Pope Francis began the Holy Year of Mercy by opening the Holy Door there. And certainly last but not least is 87-year-old Albanian parish priest who was imprisoned under the communist regime there and spent 18 years of forced hard labor. So just some of the stories of the wonderful people who are becoming cardinals this weekend will definitely be one to watch.
It will be a full weekend in Rome, and EWTN has complete coverage. Mary Shovlin, our EWTN News Nightly producer there. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Brian.
Will the right of Americans to freely practice our faith be restored under a new administration? Ryan Anderson, Senior Research Fellow with Heritage Foundation Rights, Donald Trump promised that he would make America great again. If he is to make good on that promise, he'll need to start by robustly restoring our first freedom, the free exercise of religion. Dr. Anderson joins us from the Heritage Foundation. Ryan, I wonder if Donald Trump's cabinet picks will give us a clue to his commitment to religious liberty.
That could be an insight, because what we saw is that so many of the assaults on religious freedom that took place during the Obama administration came from executive agencies, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Education, the Department of Justice. So depending on who President-elect Trump appoints to be his head of those agencies, could give us a window into what he's thinking. He needs to protect the free exercise of religion for all Americans of all faiths.
And do you think he will do that, not simply the freedom of worship, which the Democrats have talked about, even Hillary Clinton in her concession speech?
I think he needs to, because what the founders intended to protect wasn't merely the freedom of worship, piety inside of your chapel. They wanted to protect the free exercise of religion, which means Monday through Sunday, you get to live out your faith in the public square, in your place of employment, in your school, in your charity, and in your church, your synagogue, or your mosque. It'll be important that a Trump administration protects religious liberty in full.
President Ronald Reagan was pretty good at using the bully pulpit. Do you think that Trump can or should use that same pulpit to send this message of religious tolerance?
One of the ways in which President-elect Trump can actually help bind the nation together is to say that whether we agree or disagree, we need to live together. And one of the ways that we kind of protect that peaceful coexistence, we respect that pluralism, is by respecting liberty with respect to religion. We respect religious liberty, and it says, look, we're going to disagree about God, we're going to disagree about many contentious moral issues, but we're going to agree to disagree. And so we're going to respect your right to practice your faith as you understand it, not as the government understands it, not as the majority understands it.
Now, once he's in the White House, do you expect Trump to roll back Obama executive actions that changed how the federal government defines gender?
Yes, that needs to be one of the places where he starts. The Department of Education, the Department of Justice just unilaterally said that the word sex now means gender identity. It's gotten local schools in all sorts of hot water with the government, lawsuits, litigation. President Trump can instruct his DOE and DOJ to say sex means sex, not gender identity. Let local schools make those policies. He can do the same thing on Obamacare and the HHS mandate. And then Congress needs to act to make it permanent so that the next president can't undo it.
Dr. Ryan Anderson from the Heritage Foundation. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Up next, a powerful group, including many Catholics, how Latinos view the presidential election results. And the U.S. Capitol gets a facelift. See the newly restored dome just in time for the inauguration. Pope Francis warns Christians of becoming lukewarm. During Mass this morning at the Vatican, the Holy Father says, when faith isn't important in a person's life, they can lose sight of the Lord. That term, lukewarm, is used in today's first reading from the book of Revelation. Thanks for joining us this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Has Donald Trump's campaign rhetoric on immigration alienated Hispanic Americans? Perhaps some, but certainly not all. Dr. Gracie Christie, Senior Policy Advisor to the Catholic Association, joining us. Gracie, you are a descendant of Cuban immigrants. You live in Miami. How did the Cuban community there in Miami vote last week?
Well, the Cuban Americans went for Trump in a big way. And some people say that it might have carried the state of Florida towards Trump and away from Clinton. And on the streets in Little Havana and at Café Versalles, which is a place where politically people get together and talk about these issues, there was a lot of elation at Trump's victory. Maybe not so much for Trump, but because finally there's a window of opportunity to get some other ideas going in the federal conversation.
So many Latino Americans are Catholic, so I wonder if they didn't help swing the Catholic vote toward Trump.
Yes, I think so, because there were ideas. People knew that when they were voting for Clinton, they were voting for the Democratic platform, which was, unreservedly pro-abortion in ways that we hadn't seen ever, in the American discourse. So I think there was a lot of that.
Do Hispanic Americans, though, have a legitimate concern with this Trump administration?
You know, there was some rhetoric that Trump used that scared Latinos, especially people who are here, maybe not even illegally, but in ways that are not entirely permanent, like maybe they're not even residents. And there was some rhetoric that scared them. But I think more to blame than his rhetoric was the way that the Spanish language television newscasters and the stations kept reiterating the fact that they were going to be in danger if Trump was elected. So there is definitely fear on the streets, but a lot of it has been ginned up by anti-Trump activists.
Gracie, hypothetically, the president-elect asks for your advice on this issue. What would you offer?
I would say, remember that the people who are scared, Hispanics who are scared, it's not their fault they're scared. There has been rhetoric used, and they've been turned into a massive fear. He needs to address those fears and speak frankly and with the tenderness that has to be part of the American conversation to a country as beautiful as ours.
Can he be true to his commitment to immigration reform and still do that?
I think so. I think Latinos understand that the United States is a country of laws. And some of those laws have to do with who can come and go and how we keep control of that. That's completely legitimate. So he needs to separate ugly rhetoric from what makes America great, which is a country where law is respected and good things happen.
That's good advice. Dr. Gracie Christie, thank you.
Thank you.
And last week's divisive election has Catholic bishops praying for the healing of our nation. Wyatt Goolsby talked today with Los Angeles Auxiliary Bishop Robert Barron about how Catholics can help their own community heal.
Bishop Barron, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
It seems to me after this election, a lot of Catholics wanted to vote pro-life. They wanted to promote pro-life values. How do bishops go about now doing that in the culture?
The bishops have been speaking and teaching consistently for a long time on this issue. You know, obviously we're not lobbyists, we're not legislators, but by the clarity and consistency of our teaching, we have an impact on the culture. And you got to play the long game here, you know, and I think we've seen that over the past many decades. The clarity of the church's teaching on the pro-life issues has found its way into the culture, especially among the young. Well, those young, you know, grow up to be voters.
Connected to that, to the election, is sort of bridging the divides and healing the divides. How do bishops, and I guess bishops and clergy people working with lay people, begin to do that? Because there are so many divisions in this country.
Yeah, you know, and I understand that, and it's been something we're all wrestling with, and it breaks the heart of Americans to see our country so divided. To some degree, it's a natural thing, you know, in our political system, the different parties emerge, et cetera, but there's something about this election cycle that was particularly brutal in terms of the divisions. You know, one thing I would say is this, that again, the clarity and consistency of the Catholic Church's teaching around the whole range of life issues, from you know, abortion and assisted suicide and so on, to care for the poor and the homeless and the marginalized. The Church has a consistent approach to these issues. And in many ways, the divides you find in the political culture are overcome in the very unity and consistency of the Church's teaching.
In your diocese, Archbishop Gomez has talked about the shifting center of gravity of Catholicism in the U.S., from east to west, from north to south. How do you think that changes the way you guys as bishops begin to sort of approach the country in sort of a pastoral sense?
Well, we're just alive to the fact that that shift has happened. Not to say anything negative all about, you know, the East Coast or my hometown of Chicago, great churches. But the center of gravity, as you say, has shifted.
And do you think that the bishops are noting the fact that they elected DiNardo from Houston, Galveston, Houston, and Gomez from Los Angeles?
It probably played a role. I mean, you vote for the man. I think that's true. You vote for the man with his qualities and his integrity. But I think, sure, at least in the back of the minds of the bishops, might have been the fact that you got these two men now from, roughly speaking, the southwest part of the country. Yeah, it probably played a role anyway.
Tell me, you were also elected to a new position, the Committee on Evangelization. Tell me a little bit about that. What is your role going to be, and why is that so important?
Yeah, I'll tell you the truth. I was a little bit surprised I was elected. I'm pretty new at this game. Obviously, it's a passion of mine, evangelization. I think it's concern number one in the Catholic Church today, the massive attrition of our own people, the fact that we're losing huge numbers of Catholics, especially among the young. The young are telling us in survey after survey why they're leaving. And so I think we as a church know what the problem is, and to some degree we know how to address it, and we should get going.
Bishop Barron, thanks so much for talking with us. We appreciate your time.
God bless you. Good being with you.
And thank you for joining us tonight. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. We're going to leave you with a look at the newly restored U.S. Capitol Dome. It was unveiled today after a $60 million renovation project. Workers meticulously cleaned and repaired cracks dating back to the Eisenhower administration. That was the 50s when I was a kid. The dome will now serve as the backdrop for January's presidential inauguration. Good night. God bless.